Hi guys, James at RampantLionReviews again for you today with another beer review. For this one, we are going to head up to Norway once again for the first time in what feels like a good long while. Now we're going to return to a brewery that has featured on the channel a couple of times before, albeit not in about 5 years. I'm not really sure how that came to be, but it's most likely that I didn't come across any of their beers that really interested me for quite some time. But the beer that we're going to have a look at today is one that is supposed to be very, very nice. It's a style that I very much enjoy. We've been reviewing quite a few of these in recent times actually, and I have to say this beer is a bit of a monster, and it's also one of their latest releases through Systembolaget down here in Sweden. So yeah, needless to say, I'm very curious to see what this one is going to have in store for us. Hopefully it's another good beer. Hopefully it makes for an interesting review, and as always I hope that you guys watching enjoy my take on this one as well. So yeah, for this review then, we are going to head to Grimstad, which is a little bit to the south of Oslo in the southern part of Norway, and we're going to have a look at another beer from Nøgne Ø Brewery. So this particular beer is called Sovereign of the Seas. It comes in at 17% ABV, so I think this is potentially the strongest Nøgne Ø beer that we've ever tried, and this one is an English-style barley wine aged in bourbon barrels. So yeah, this beer was released as part of the Tillfälligt temporary assortment through Systembolaget here in Sweden on the 27th of January 2023. So yeah, this one I think should be quite interesting. We actually have a number of the beers from this series in the Bishop's Arms and Gustav Adolfs Torg in Malmö. We've got, some of them are Imperial Stouts, some of them are barley wines. I think there's like one Doppelbock in there as well, if memory serves me correctly, and some old ales and things like that. But yeah, the Nøgne Ø Barrel Age series is pretty damn good actually. We've tried a few of them and they're all pretty impressive beers. But yeah, let's crack on with this one then and see how we got on. My first Nøgne Ø review since 2017, which is quite impressive. So yeah, as always with my reviews then, I'll tell you a little bit about the brewery before we taste the beer. If you want to get straight to the tasting though, just fast forward. All the usual links are in the video description below. That's the brewery website, the link to my other reviews that I've done from Nøgne Ø before, and we will no doubt add more to that list in the near future. But there's all the usual social media down there. If you want to see more reviews, do please consider subscribing to the channel. The support you give is massively appreciated. And remember, you can go into the channel homepage and search for beer using the geography tagging system. Just go up to the top, use the search bar, put your hometown, state, county, province, whatever you want in there. If I've reviewed beers from your local area, they should pop up. Failing that, you can check out the playlist of beers from different countries, and you'll find this one in the Norwegian playlist along with many other things. So yeah, let's go on to my brewery notes then, and we'll talk about Nøgne Ø Brewery for the first time in what feels like a very long time. So, Nøgne Ø, as I've mentioned to you already, was originally founded back in 2002 by Gunnar Vig and Kjetil Yikken. So Kjetil had actually worked as an airline pilot for SAS, Scandinavian Airlines, and he'd been introduced to craft beer during his numerous trips to the US. But he and Gunnar were originally home brewers, and they say they decided to start brewing on a larger scale because they were quite sick of the lack of diversity of beers that were available in Norway. And of course we know that Nøgne Ø Brewery went on to be one of the kind of pioneers in Europe, not just in Norway and Scandinavia. But the company itself is based in Grimstad in Norway, which is in Aust-Agder county in the Sørlandet region in the southern part of Norway. And it's a little maritime town that's split between a few different islands actually, which are called Skjærgård, and they only have a population there of about 21,000 people. But for a number of years they existed without paid employees. People were quite happy to give up their time to help them produce craft beer because they wanted something better than, you know, the fizzy yellow stuff. But they've grown from being a 300 hectolitre brewery in 2003, and by 2010 they were producing an estimated 350,000 litres of beer per year, which is 3,500 hectolitres I should say, and as of 2021 they've apparently been producing 20,000 hectolitres of beer per year, so that's what, about 2 million litres, which is pretty damn impressive. But in November of 2013, Hansa Borg acquired the main part of the shares in the company, and this allowed them to export their beers a lot more widely. But Kjetil Yikken stayed with the brewery until 2015. Apparently he grew quite dissatisfied with some of the things that Hansa Borg were doing, but at this point he moved to Crete in Greece, and he founded a winery and also the Solo Beer Brewery, which has featured on the channel before. But since then, he's also been involved with Axiom Brewery in Brno in the Czech Republic, and also Telemark Brewery in Skien in Norway as well. But in 2017, Nøgne Ø moved into a new building very close to where they were based originally, and they've continually expanded their capacity over the last few years. But the name Nøgne Ø means naked isle in Old Danish, and this was chosen from a well-known 19th century poem by Terje Vigen, or called Terje Vigen by Henrik Ibsen, who worked for some time in Grimstad as an apprentice pharmacist. But they've also boasted the title at one point, this company, of being the first sake brewery in Europe. So they brewed all their sake using the Yamahai method and using Grimpur rice as well from Hokkaido in Japan, the North Island. Beautiful place, which I do recommend you visit. But they had a number of different products in their range, and the sake that they produced used a similar symbol, but they also used the Japanese kanji for Hadakajima, which is, naked island in Japanese. So I think they stopped brewing sake in around 2018, 2019 or something like that. Unfortunately, I never got to try any of them, but there are one or two other sake breweries across Europe now. I know there's one in London, and I will need to investigate where there are some others, because it would be really cool to try some European brewed Japanese style sakes. So but as of January 2023, when I'm filming this review for you, Nøgne Ø have produced 85 different kinds of beer according to Untappd, although I would not be surprised if that number is actually higher. It seemed very, very low when I thought about it, because these guys have been very experimental over the years. One of the most famous beers, of course, is the Dark Horizon, and I think we reviewed the Dark Horizon 4 or 5 on the channel here one time, which was given to me by Tom Young, who's very active and gets the Nøgne Ø name out there quite a lot. But when it comes to Nøgne Ø, I would say they are best known for their big high alcohol beers. You know, the barrel program has remained very, very good, but they do a lot of kind of sessionable and more kind of drinkable beers these days, and that's one of the main reasons for their increase in volume. The Nøgne Ø stuff is quite easy to get across Scandinavia and in other parts of Europe as well. But that is all I can really tell you about Nøgne Ø for the moment. If you want to learn a little bit more about these guys, you can check out the brewery website. You can follow them on Facebook and Instagram to keep up to date with all the latest goings on, and you can of course check out the Rate Beer, Untappd and Beer Advocate pages to learn a little bit more about all the different beers that these guys have done. So let's crack on and have a wee look at the beer itself. So as you can see, the artwork on this one is quite different to what we've had from Nøgne Ø before, and I think the camera is going to hate this one just because there's not too much in the way of colour contrast, but that's it. But you can see there is the new Nøgne Ø bottle cap, and you've also got some nice kind of sort of Japanese, it's almost like kind of a mix of Japanese and Viking design on the thing there. I'm not sure if that's going to show up on the camera or not, but there you are. But like we said earlier, this one is a 17% English style barley wine, which has been aged in Jim Beam casks for 7 months, I think it was, and this is bottle number 4185 of 7600. So I think this should be pretty special to try. Actually, I don't think I tried this one. We've tried 2 or 3 of them in the pub actually, and some of the staff tastings and things. So as I say, this series of beers is pretty good, but I think we should crack this one open and see what we have. So this is the Sovereign of the Seas, 70% bourbon barrel-aged barley wine. Let's get this guy out and see what it's all about. It's a nice way to kind of start off your Sunday, the Sunday lunchtime. But this is going to be pretty awesome, I think. I'm pretty sure the first ever beer that I reviewed from Nøgne Ø was a Barleywine, the number 100, if I remember correctly. That was pretty good. So, anyway, as you can see, this beer has poured pretty much as you would expect of a barley wine, but this is one of the darker barley wines I've come across in quite a wee while. But with it being 17%, I would not be surprised if this is like a double mash or maybe even a triple mash, something like that. You never know. But you could see that when we poured the beer, there was about a quarter finger, if that, of a frothy kind of fawn coloured head there. That has just faded away to be pretty much nothing on the surface of the beer, but there is a little ring just around the edge of the glass, which you can see. As I say, it does look very, very nice. In terms of the colour of this beer, this one is like an exceptionally dark mahogany. When you shine the light through it, you do get a little bit of a kind of ruby-ish tint to the beer. But yeah, there's not too much going on in that particular sense. Yeah, you have got a little bit of a ruby-ish kind of tint to it, but yeah, it's a very, very dark chestnut colour, this one. So remember, the colour of your beer depends on a few things. One, the type of malt that you use. This goes a long way to determining your EBC rating. Two, length of your wort boil is also going to play a role, because the longer you boil the wort, the more the sugars caramelise, and thus you get a darker colour of beer. Any barrel aging that you do or any adjuncts that you put in can affect the colour of the beer as well, but when it comes to a big dark barley wine like this, I think it would be pretty difficult to change the colour with the barrel aging, although it is more possible with the brown sugary beers than it is with the kind of stouts and things, the black beers. But yeah, in terms of appearance, nothing overly surprising about this beer, other than the fact that it is pretty damn dark actually, but it looks very, very nice, I have to say. So I think we don't need to say anything more about that appearance. We'll go on and we'll have a wee look at the aroma and see what we have. Oh yeah. Now, for me, this smells pretty damn old school, which I like. You know, I do like beers that give you this kind of nostalgia value. But you can tell this is an absolute monster of a beer, which at 17% shouldn't be a surprise, you know. So, yeah, it's one of these beers that it gives you everything you want from the style in terms of aroma, but it's just so rich and so satisfying. That's probably a good way to kind of summarise this beer up. With this one, you've got the big brown sugars, you've got a little bit of the hoppy kind of the hoppy resinous character in there as well, still remaining despite the barrel aging, and you've also got the big kind of fruity notes as well. This is going to be pretty awesome, I have to say. A very nice return to Nøgne Ø, of course, as well. Hopefully they release a few more of these through Systembolaget. That would be awesome. I don't know who actually released this one or which importer provided this one. But yeah, aroma wise, this is very, very nice. So, backbone of the beer, you've got that, you can smell of course that lovely smooth American oak from the bourbon barrels. For me, as I've always said, American bourbon is a lot sweeter and kind of smoother than Scotch whisky, if you like, although maybe saying they're all smoother is not quite the case, but they're definitely sweeter. But yeah, you've got that lovely smooth American oak in there, there's the little touch of vanilla, and you can smell the bourbon sugars, of course. For me, Jim Beam, I think, has always been a very, very sweet bourbon, if you like. I think I've only tried it once or twice. Of course, you know, being Scottish and having lived in Scotland for a very long time, you don't tend to turn to bourbons that much. You know, it's just, you've got so much local stuff that's good, you don't need to. But on top of that, of course, you've got a whole host of other stuff going on. One thing I will say about this aroma is, it's certainly not the most complex that I've come across. I get the feeling this is one of these beers where the aroma is going to be nowhere near as complex as the flavour, to be honest with you. And I think a lot of the reason for that is just how boozy it actually is, because you can smell the booze on this beer a mile away. And this is definitely among the strongest beers that we've reviewed on the channel, actually, probably within the top 10 or 15. Maybe even more than that, but whatever. But yeah, above the kind of bourbon brown sugars, you can smell quite a few little things going on. So you do have a little touch of like a kind of very dense, kind of browny, cakey type aroma in there. You are getting that. It's like a very dense and intense kind of like brandy soaked fruit loaf or something like that. You're definitely getting some elements of that out of this beer. On top of that, of course, you're getting these big, highly caramelized treacle molasses brown sugar type notes. And you can tell that this beer has had a considerable length of wort boil, because you get the leathery notes out of it, which is very, very nice. So yeah, lovely big kind of leathery qualities coming out of the beer as well, like leathery brown sugars. On top of that, of course, though, you do get some of the sweeter brown sugars too. So yeah, lovely leatheriness in there, lovely big kind of sweeter brown sugars. And you've also got, you do have a little bit of a straight up treacle molasses in this one as well, which I quite like. I am getting wee elements of a kind of biscuity character too. But yeah, there's wee bits of like, you know, lighter toffee and fudge and things coming out of this one too. The brighter brown sugars, definitely showing you a little bit of that. There are one or two little kind of nutty elements to the beer as well, I think. But yeah, it goes together quite nicely. One thing I should point out about this one that I thought was potentially a little bit unusual with it is there is some wheat in this barley wine as well. Usually barley wines are only barley malt. But of course you do have variants of this style known as wheat wines and rye wines, and there probably are a couple of others out there in breweries across the world. But yeah, this barley wine actually does contain a little bit of wheat, and that's potentially where some of the kind of bready and cakey characteristics are coming from. But yeah, let's have a wee look at the kind of hoppy and fruity side of the beer then. So yeah, on top of that, you do, even though this beer, 7 months is not an overly long aging time, I guess we could say, in the barrels, but you still have some of the hoppy character left in this one. There's a little bit of earthiness in there. You do get quite a little bit of pine resin still, I think, and that makes me wonder if Chinook is one of the hops in this. Chinook and Cascade was always a popular combination when it came to the old school American barley wines, like Sierra Nevada Bigfoot, for example, was always one like that. So yeah, you do have that lovely little bit of piney resin in there. You do have some floral aromaticity left, and there is a wee bit of grassiness. But of course, with it being a barrel-aged beer and barley wine, you know, barley wines have a lot of hops in them, but the aroma, in my opinion, is not overly hop forward. But yeah, you are still getting some of the green component lingering there. But on the fruity side of things, then, yeah, on the fruity side of things, this beer is very, very nice. You do get a little bit of that kind of cakey note behind it, like Christmas pudding. But then, yeah, you've got a good, there's a little bit of raisiny sharpness to this one, but there's a lot of sweet plum and maybe some kind of prunes and dates and stuff underneath that. But then, yeah, you've got quite rich figgy characters as well. There's there's quite a lot of blackberry in this one for me. But I would point out the fruits are not like tart and bright. They are actually a little bit more kind of oily and phenolic. I think that's a good way to describe the aroma of this beer. But it's got a lovely sweetness to it on the fruity, with the fruity characters as well. I think this beer smells lovely. I think we can say that quite safely. Yeah, as I always say when it comes to tasting beer, take a bit of time to enjoy the aroma of these before you get stuck into them. But I do think it is about time that we had a taste of this one to see what it's all about. So yeah, I've got a feeling this is going to be a good return to Nøgne Ø. So yeah, this one is the Sovereign of the Seas, an English style barley wine at 17% ABV, aged in Jim Beam casks for 7 months. This one comes to you from Nøgne Ø in Grimstad in August Agder in Norway. Let's get stuck in. Slange, skål, cheers. Oh yeah. I'm going to say straight away, that is pretty nice. And it's interesting because when you first take it in, it gives you a lot of sweetness on the impact. And then it just mellows out and gives you that more kind of dry and toasty character that you would expect of an English barley wine, as opposed to the more kind of sweet and oily American barley wine. So yeah, that's really interesting actually. Yeah, as I say, I do quite like how this goes together. Yeah, gets a thumbs up from me. Where do we start with this one? I will say this is a big boozy beast. It does get that, and that's one of the things I would be curious to try. The original beer, I'd be very curious to know where the original Sovereign of the Seas lies on the alcohol scale, because you can feel with this one thing that always happens when you barrel age a beer is you sacrifice a little bit of the mouthfeel to get all the kind of woody infused flavours, and this one, it is actually, it's not quite as thick as I was expecting it to be, but we'll come to that a wee bit later on. But it's still a lovely, lovely beer, this one. This is definitely like an evening sipper. This is probably one that you want to share with somebody, actually. And I just opened this because I've got some homework to do, and I thought it would, would give me a little bit of inspiration, should we say. But yeah, this one, it is a very, very nice beer. So thumbs up to Nøgne Ø. It shows their kind of barrel programs are still pretty damn good. So let's just break this down and describe it for you a wee bit more in depth, as we always do. So, middle of your palate then, we have, in the middle of the palate, we've got this lovely, you can feel the backbone of the beer is, of course, that smooth American oak. Further back that you go in that middle third of your palate, you'll feel it gets a little bit drier, but the further forward you go, you'll feel it's got a little bit of a kind of vanilla type character in there as well. But yeah, lovely smooth woody notes in there. You've got a wee bit dryness at the back, as I say, a little bit of vanilla going further forward. Then you've just got that layer of the American bourbon in there, the sweet sort of spirit character out of it. So yeah, that's quite interesting. So yeah, on top of the on top of the bourbon layer, you start to get, there is a little bit of a kind of cakey or bready type quality in there. It's a mix of a few things. As I've said, it's kind of like, if you think about that bit of cake mix, if you make a Christmas pudding, you think about that little bit of really highly caramelized stuff that gets stuck to the baking tray. That's what the next layer up in this beer is actually like. You've got a little bit of that almost like very slightly burnt, highly caramelized like cake mix. It's got a little bit of that going on. Above that though, you do get like a sort of sweet brandy soaked kind of rye bread type quality coming out of this one. So yeah, quite a wee bit of that in this beer for sure. Yeah, lovely little bit of that. Just the kind of toasted cakey note in there. Then the rye bread, the brandy soaked rye bread, and then above that there's maybe a little bit of a slightly sweeter brown bready character, but not too much. Beyond that, you start to get the brown sugary characters out of this beer, and it's got a mix of sweetness and dryness and everything going on in there. So yeah, above the sort of more wholemeal brown bready layer, because yeah, you've got the cakey notes, just a bit of rye, sweet oily rye bread, and then a wee bit of a wholemeal brown bread. Then you have the above that you have a kind of lovely leathery, you've got a lovely sort of more leathery brown sugary layer there, but it's actually not madly leathery. I do wonder more, like, when I think about the flavours that I'm getting out of this beer now, I do wonder if this is more like double or triple mash, something like that, rather than being an overly long wort boil. But I think, technically speaking, if you have a double mash and you give it a longer wort boil, you're not going to see the same levels of caramelisation that you would if it's just a single mash beer. I think it's particle density and all this, it's just a bit of chemistry. So yeah, this beer, it's nowhere near as leathery in its brown sugary flavour as I thought it was going to be from the aroma. That is one thing I would say. So yeah, you've got this lovely leathery, lovely leathery kind of brown sugary character coming out of this one. So yeah, I do love how that goes together. Lovely leathery kind of brown sugary notes. And then, but not too intense, like I said. And above that, you start to get the more kind of sweet and oily side of things. So yeah, it's the brown sugars are very layered in this one. So the base that you have is that kind of slightly leathery quality, and this is all above the bread, so toward the front of that middle third of your palate, you get a little touch of nuttiness coming out of it, which I do like. And then you have the, as we say, you do have, above that, you've got the, you've got a little bit, yeah, you've got the more sweeter caramel in there, but in the dead centre of your palate, it is more of a, it is more of a kind of treacle molasses sort of notes. So yeah, the dead centre of your palate is treacle molasses. Underneath that, you've got the sweeter caramel. There are elements of like a kind of butterscotchy, butter candy type flavour in there too. And then underneath that, you've got the more leathery, kind of smooth sort of things as well. So yeah, the way that that goes together is really quite nice. Yeah, this is good actually. You get little elements of like fudge and toffee and stuff out of this the further you go into the aftertaste. As I say, you've got a little bit of a nutty, like a pecan or almondy character in there as well. But the complexity of this beer is, of course, in the middle of the, it is in the middle third of the palate. So yeah, the way everything goes together in this beer, I think, is very, very nice. So it gets a big thumbs up from me in that middle third of the palate. So yeah, I think that's everything we need to say about that. Let's go to the back third of the palate and have a wee look at that. So the border region between middle and back third of your palate, you've got a little bit of a kind of cakey, bready build up in there, but the base of the back third of the palate, you've got a little bit of a more woody character in there. You've got a little bit of a dry woodiness, of course, too, which is nice. Above that, you can feel a little bit of the bourbon sugars, which are of course a little bit drier as well. As I always say, more dry and bitter flavours come out further back on the palate, sweeter flavours come out further forward. So yeah, a little bit of a kind of dry, a little bit of a more kind of dry character coming out of this one. And then above that, yeah, above that you have the, yeah, above all of that you have the more, you've got a little bit more of a kind of cakey, bready note coming out of this one. So like I was saying, that sort of brandy soaked rye bread or something, it's kind of like that. You've got a big kind of fluffy layer of that. So yeah, you've got a big fluffy layer of that. And then above all of that, you've got more like a kind of German, you do have a little bit of a more kind of German rye bread sort of thing. So yeah, you've got that. Yeah, as I say, you have a little bit of a, yeah, I would call it more of it. Yeah, it's more like a kind of just very fluffy, airy rye bread. Then you've got a more wholemeal brown bread, you know. Then above that, you start to get the elements of the yeast coming out. So above all of that, yeah, you have this kind of more airy, like, it kind of tastes a little bit like honeycomb, but there's also a little bit of a more kind of dark brown sugary note in there. I always get these type of flavours from the yeast on the back third of the palate, but definitely you can feel back third of the palate, the flavour is a good little bit taller. Then as you come further forward into the middle third of the palate, things just condense down and squash together a wee bit more. So yeah, I do like how these things go together. So yeah, the way that the way that the malty and yeasty side of this beer goes together is very, very nice. But this is quite a slick, oily sort of thing. But yeah, definitely a lot more kind of bready on the back third of your palate for sure. Let's go on to the kind of hoppy side of things then. Edges of the palate. So yeah, like I said, some of the hoppy character does linger in this beer a little bit. So you've got a lovely little touch of earthiness there in the back corners of the palate. But as you move further forward, it gives you a little bit of a herbal character. And as you push toward the kind of front corners of the tongue, you've got more of a, you do have more of a kind of piney resin note underneath, but you get a little touch of a floral aromaticity on the front corners of the tongue. Round the front curve of the palate, though, it's definitely a little bit lighter and grassy, but you can feel the hops have dropped out of this beer a little bit. They've got a little bit of that smoothness and kind of oily character that you get when you barrel age the beer. But as I said earlier, this is only aged for 7 months. it's not such a long time compared to what you can do with barrel aging. But yeah, you can, and there's just something about the flavours of these beers, the pine resin and the kind of floral note. It makes me think that this is maybe a classic sort of Chinook and Cascade combination or something like that that's going on here. It feels very, very familiar. But yeah, a little bit of earthiness, a good little bit of pine resin underneath, some floral aromaticity, and a wee touch of a grassiness around the front curve of the tongue. But yeah, I do like how that goes together as well. But let's look at the front third of your palate and the fruity side of the beer. So the border region between front third and middle third of your palate, you get a nice little bit of a, you get a nice little bit of a kind of cakey build up in there. It feels like a kind of brighter and sweeter sort of brandy soaked fruit bread or something like that. So a little bit of that flavour there. And then the base of the front third of the palate, you've got the smooth oaky character in there and quite a bright bourbony brown sugar. Then you have that nice oily bubble where the juicy fruity esters just roll their way out of the beer. So let's look at that. So yeah, this beer for me, it doesn't really have like a raisiny sharpness to it. It has more like a, it's got a little bit of a more, I would say that it has a little bit of a more kind of like plummy or pruny type note on top. So if we're talking about the back third, the back half of that front third of your palate, sorry, there's a little bit of a kind of pruny note in there, then there's dates underneath, and then it's definitely like dry sultanas. But the fruity character for me actually has a little bit of booze behind it. You really do get a bit of boozy punch from that. So yeah, prunes, dates, sultanas, and as you move further forward, it's got a wee bit of a more, the kind of sultanas linger there, but as you reach the middle of that front third of your palate, you do definitely get like a kind of juicy figgy quality, and the figs kind of form the base of the front half of the front third of your palate. But above all of that, you've got a wee bit of a more, you do have a little bit of a more kind of blackberry sort of note coming out of the beer. So yeah, I think for me, the kind of red fruity character of this beer, or yeah, fruity character, red blackberry is not a red fruit, I guess you could say it's a berry, but yeah, you do get a lot of, for me there's a lot of blackberry to this one and a lot of dried fruity character, the dates, the prunes and the sultanas really. But yeah, the fruity side of this beer is pretty boozy, but it is very, very nice. Yeah, I think that's everything we really need to say about the flavour of this beer. So we should move on and round off with the mouthfeel. Like I said to you, this beer for me, it's definitely full-bodied and it is quite a dense flavour. I think this one is probably in the middle range of full-bodied. It's not the heaviest and kind of thickest of barley wines that I've come across. And that does make me wonder whether it's, we've talked about, it being double and triple mash and things like that, or whether, or exactly what it is. 17% is pretty heavy, and I do wonder how much of that alcohol has been accumulated over the barrel aging process, because, that is a thing to consider when you think about these beers. But yeah, if it was triple mash or double mash, I would think the mouthfeel would be a little bit heavier, but as I say, you always sacrifice a little bit of mouthfeel when you barrel age the beer. But as I say, for me, it's kind of mid-range, full-bodied. The carbonation is very smooth. It's a very slick, oily mouthfeel, which you always want from a barley wine. I think there is a little bit of bitterness lingering in there with this one. I wouldn't be surprised if at this stage it's sort of 40 or 50 IBUs. There is a little bit of hoppy character there, but of course that can change over time. In terms of the kind of malty side of things, I would say this beer, you've got a lovely woody smoothness in there, you get a bit of dryness out of it, you've got lots of big thick brown sugars, you've also got these nice kind of sweet cakey notes coming out of the beer as well, and you've got a lovely big kind of sweet fruity character coming out of the beer, which I have to admit I really do enjoy. But yeah, the way this beer goes about its business, I think, is very, very nice. So it gets a big thumbs up from me for that. But yeah, I like this one. It's pretty damn solid. So yeah, big oily and dry fruitiness, a little bit of phenolic quality to it as well. But yeah, really solid barley wine, this one. And it certainly will put a little bit of hair on your chest, that's fair to say. But yeah, I think we can leave it at that for this one. So this was the Sovereign of the Seas, a 17% English barley wine aged in bourbon barrels from Nøgne Ø Brewery in Grimstad in Norway. A really nice return to these guys after quite some time, and I know there are other beers in this range. So we need to see about reviewing one or two more of these on the channel. But yeah, this thing was an absolute monster, and I'm going to go away and enjoy the rest of this now. But yeah, once again, thank you for watching my beer reviews. Until the next time, please like, subscribe, share, all the usual YouTube stuff. Let me know your own thoughts on this beer in the comment section below. Let me know what your favourite beers are from Nøgne Ø as well, and we will return to these guys at some point very, very soon. But until then, slàinte, skål, cheers, see you guys in the next review.